Then he saw him, a small boy, no older than 6, sitting alone on a park bench. The boy was wearing a worn jacket and clutching a tablet in his small hands. His face was a study in intense focus, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with an unnerving awareness. Alexander dismissed him instantly. This was an insult, a prank, a trap. "No," Liam said, his voice filled with a desperate, heartbreaking conviction. "I don't care about your money. I care about my mom. I'm not a scammer. I'm your son." He showed him the faded photograph, the image of his mother and Alexander on the beach, the locket she always wears. It has your name etched on the back, a reminder of a man she never forgot. One rainy Tuesday night, his universe began to unravel. Alexander looked at the photograph, at the ghost of a younger, softer version of himself. He looked at the boy's face, at the familiar eyes that were a mirror of his own. The logical part of his mind, the part that had built an empire, screamed fraud. But a deeper, more primal part of him, a part he had long since buried, felt a strange, terrifying tug, a connection he couldn't deny. He saw the boy's raw courage, the unwavering love he had for his mother, and the desperation that had driven him to this absurd, brilliant act. Elena had gone out to meet a client, promising to be back by 9. Liam, nestled in his makeshift command center, a desk cluttered with wires, tablets, and schematics, was working on a new project, an AI-driven program to categorize her design files with perfect accuracy. He was so engrossed that he didn't notice the time until the clock on his screen chimed past 10. A flicker of unease, a rare emotion for him, took hold. His mother was never late. He was a man who trusted no one, but he was also a man who could see a truth when it was staring him in the face. And the truth was, this child, this 6-year-old prodigy, was telling him the truth. His world, a universe of spreadsheets and power plays, was about to be turned upside down by a single, shattering revelation. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a father. And a woman from his past, the mother of his son, was in danger because of him. The confrontation, meant to be a tense standoff between rivals, had become a desperate plea for a new family and a new hope. The drive back to Vance Innovations was conducted in a profound and unsettling silence. For Alexander, the world he had so meticulously built was now a house of cards, its foundation shaken by the quiet determination of a 6-year-old boy. The man of cold, calculated logic was now grappling with a truth that defied all reason. He was a father. The photograph, the locket, the raw, unfiltered fear. In Elena's voice, it all coalesced into a single, undeniable reality. A brief, almost forgotten encounter had not only left a legacy, but had now returned to haunt him, putting the life of the mother and child he never knew he had in mortal peril. He tried calling her phone. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. The same. He began to run diagnostics on her location via a simple tracking app she had on her phone, a little piece of digital oversight he had set up for her safety. The signal was last active near her client's office, a few blocks away. Then it went dead. No signal. Nothing. His first instinct, the one that had served him so well in the corporate world, was to dismiss it as an elaborate fraud, a sophisticated plot to extort him. But the look in Liam's eyes, the mirror image of his own, had been too genuine. The boy's desperation was not an act, it was a fire. And Liam's hacking skills, a digital ghost that had left his team of experts baffled, were far too real to be a child's prank. A small voice in the back of Alexander's mind, a voice he had suppressed for years, whispered a terrible thought. What if it was all true? A cold dread, a feeling he couldn't process with logic, began to set in. He was a genius, but he was also a 6-year-old boy. He wanted his mom. Back in his office, a sanctuary of control and order, Alexander ordered his head of security, a man named Mark, to run a series of discreet, high-priority investigations. The first, a DNA test, was to be a formality, a simple cold piece of science to disprove this absurd claim. He expected the results to come back negative, to restore his world to its predictable order, but deep down, he knew they wouldn't. The moment his gaze had met Liam's in the park, a part of him had already known the truth. His tablet buzzed, not with an incoming call, but with a notification from a hidden application he had installed on his mother's device. It was a digital panic button, a failsafe he had created that would send an encrypted message to his tablet if she ever felt threatened. The message was a data packet, a series of compressed files. He opened it, his heart pounding in his chest. The DNA test results, delivered with a sense of urgency that was palpable, confirmed it. Liam was his son. The news hit him with the force of a physical blow. He was a father, a powerful, reclusive CEO. A man who had chosen a life of professional isolation was now connected by blood to a 6-year-old child prodigy and a woman from his past. The revelation shattered his carefully constructed world, and for the first time in years, he felt a profound sense of helplessness. His power, his money, his influence, none of it mattered. The most important people in his life were in danger, and he had no idea where they were or who had taken them. It wasn't a live call, it was a pre-recorded message, a video of his mother. Her face, usually so full of light, was pale and streaked with fear. The video was shaky, recorded in a confined, dark space. "Liam," she began, her voice a desperate whisper. "My love, listen carefully. I've been taken. Don't call the police. Don't tell anyone." He went to Liam, who was sitting in a high-tech conference room, calmly navigating a complex data analysis program. The boy looked up, his face devoid of judgment, his eyes filled with a quiet, desperate hope. "It's true," Alexander said, his voice a low, raspy whisper. "You're my son." He watched, his small hands gripping the tablet, his mind working furiously to process the information. Kidnapped. The word was a foreign object, a nightmare from a movie. His mother, who was so strong, so brave, was now a victim. Liam simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the truth they both now shared. "Can you help us now?" he asked, his voice breaking with emotion. "Can you find her?" Her voice continued, strained with a desperate urgency. "You have to find him, Liam. You have to find your father. He's the only one who can help us. His name is Alexander." A flicker of a name, a ghost from her past. "He doesn't know about you. He doesn't know about me. You have to find him and tell him everything." Alexander, a man who had never been asked for help, a man who was always the one in control, felt a new purpose, a new kind of power rising within him. He was no longer just a CEO. He was a father, and a father protects his family. "We will find her," he said, the words filled with a promise that was more sacred than any contract. "We will find them both." The message was a torrent of raw, unfiltered emotion, a series of frantic, disjointed words. She then held up a small, silver locket, the only piece of jewelry she ever wore. This is all I have. Remember this." The search for Elena began in earnest. Alexander mobilized the vast resources of Vance Innovations, his security team, his private investigators, his digital forensics experts. They were all now on a new mission. He worked side by side with Liam, a dynamic and unlikely partnership. Liam's digital skills, his ability to read code and track digital footprints, were invaluable. He could see patterns where the adults saw chaos. He could navigate the dark web with an ease that terrified and amazed Alexander. He was the digital key to the puzzle, and Alexander was the human muscle, the one with the power and the influence to make things happen. The video then took a dark turn. The camera shook violently, and a faint, high-pitched scream from his mother cut through the air. A new voice, a deep, guttural growl, filled the audio. "Tell Alexander Vance that the clock is ticking. Tell him if he doesn't want to find you and your mother in pieces, he'll give us what we want." The chilling threat, delivered with a casual cruelty, was followed by the sound of a device being crushed and the screen going black. Together, they began to trace the source of the kidnapper's threat. Liam, using his genius, was able to isolate the initial signal, a heavily encrypted message sent from a temporary server. Alexander's team, using their resources, was able to trace the server's location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The information was a lead, a trail of breadcrumbs that was finally leading them somewhere. The world, for 6-year-old Liam, was a series of logical puzzles to be solved. He saw not chaos, but code. His small, nimble fingers, far too young to grasp a baseball, could navigate a command line with the precision of a seasoned programmer. His mind, a sponge for data and an architect of algorithms, was a world away from the other kids his age who were captivated by cartoons and sandbox politics. His mother, Elena, was his universe. She was a warm, vibrant presence, a grounding force in his highly cerebral world. She was the one who reminded him to eat, to sleep, to go outside and feel the sun on his face. She was a freelance graphic designer, and their small, two-bedroom apartment, while modest, was a haven of creativity and love. The more they worked together, the more Alexander's cold, logical demeanor began to thaw. He saw the world through his son's eyes, a world of intricate puzzles and hidden truths. He saw the boy's love for his mother, a fierce, unwavering devotion that was a testament to the kind of woman Elena must be. He saw a child who, despite his genius, was still just a child, a small boy in a world that was far too big for him. The emotional walls he had built around himself for years were finally beginning to crumble. Liam sat in stunned silence, the words echoing in his mind. Alexander Vance. The name felt like a puzzle piece he had just been handed. His father. A man he never knew existed. A man whose name was now tied to a chilling threat. The innocence of his childhood, the simple, protected life with his mother, was gone. He was no longer a boy playing with code. He was a son on a mission. He was a genius baby. And his first and most important puzzle was to find the father he had never met and to save his mother from the abyss. He was a father, and his son was a genius. His son's mother, a woman he had barely known, was now the center of his world. The CEO's life of cold, predictable isolation was over. In its place, a new, messy, and infinitely more meaningful reality was beginning to take shape. The breadcrumbs led them to a digital ghost, a shadowy figure who had been pulling the strings from within. As Liam, with Alexander's team of digital forensics experts in tow, delved deeper into the encrypted signals and temporary servers, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The data wasn't just being sent from a random location. It was being routed through a series of internal proxies, a digital cloak and dagger operation designed to hide the source. The source, they soon discovered, was not a hostile foreign entity or a rival company. It was an insider. He looked at the empty chair at the dining table, a place where his mother should be sitting. He looked at the last, distorted image of her on the screen, her face full of fear but her eyes filled with love. He was her last hope. The clock was ticking. A profound stillness settled over the small apartment. The rain outside, once a gentle rhythm against the window, now seemed to mock the deafening silence within. Liam, a child who dealt in absolutes and logic, was grappling with a reality that defied all reason. His mother, Elena, the very sun in his sky, was gone, and his only hope was a name Alexander Vance, a father he didn't know he had. Liam's genius was the key. While the adults were focusing on the complex encryption and the firewalls, Liam was seeing something else, the flaws in the logic, the subtle, repeated errors in the code that were the digital equivalent of a human signature. He isolated the digital footprint, a series of data packets that, when unencrypted, revealed a shocking truth. The packets weren't just being sent. They were being received by another internal IP address, a user within the Vance Innovations Network. The gravity of the situation, however, did not paralyze him. It focused him. He was a small ship in a vast, stormy ocean, but he had a compass. His mother's message had been a data packet, a series of compressed files, but to Liam, it was a treasure map. He began his search, not with tears, but with a cold, analytical precision that was the core of his being. Alexander, a man who prided himself on his ability to read people, was now forced to confront a betrayal he never saw coming. The IP address belonged to his most trusted confidant, his head of research and development, a man named Jonathan Thorne. Jonathan was a brilliant, charismatic man who had been with Alexander since the company's inception. He was more than an employee. He was a friend, a mentor, a brother in arms. The idea that he was a traitor, a viper in his own house, was a bitter pill to swallow. First, he needed more information. The name Alexander Vance was a good start, but in a world of billions, it was a grain of sand on a digital beach. He needed a picture, a face to put to the name. He remembered his mother's locket, a small silver heirloom she wore every day. He had often seen her open it in quiet, private moments, a soft, wistful smile on her face. He had assumed it held a picture of a relative. Now, he knew, it was a piece of the puzzle. The motive, as they began to uncover, was one of pure, unadulterated greed and jealousy. Jonathan had always been in Alexander's shadow. He was the brains, the one who came up with the groundbreaking ideas. But Alexander was the one who got the credit, the power, and the wealth. The kidnapping was a calculated move, a high-stakes play to force Alexander to hand over control of the company. The ransom was not money, it was the leadership of Vance Innovations. Jonathan, using Elena and Liam as leverage, was planning a corporate coup, a move to seize the throne he believed was rightfully his. He navigated his mother's tablet, a device he had helped her set up and secure. He knew her passwords, her patterns, her deepest digital secrets. He delved into the oldest, most protected files, the ones she had encrypted and buried in the deepest layers of her hard drive. He found a folder named A. Inside, he found a photograph, old and slightly faded, a relic from a different life. It was his mother, younger and more carefree, standing on a beach, her arm around a man. The man was handsome, with dark, intense eyes and a serious expression that softened around the edges as he smiled at her. This was him, his father. The full weight of the betrayal hit Alexander like a physical blow. He felt a profound sense of anger, but also a deep, aching sadness. He had trusted this man with his company, with his life, and in turn, Jonathan had used his past to create a weapon against him. A brief, forgotten moment with a woman he loved had been twisted into a tool of blackmail, and a brilliant child he never knew he had was now a key figure in the investigation. The photograph was his Rosetta Stone. He ran the image through a complex facial recognition program he had built himself, a piece of software that was far more sophisticated than anything commercially available. He fed it into public databases, scouring social media profiles, news articles, and corporate websites. He was looking for a ghost, a shadow from his mother's past. Liam, who had no concept of corporate politics or personal betrayal, was the one who provided the final piece of the puzzle. He discovered a hidden program on Jonathan's hard drive, a simple yet effective GPS tracker. The tracker, he discovered, was not for Elena's phone. It was for the locket she always wore. The locket, a symbol of a love from the past, was now a digital leash, a tool for a kidnapper to track his victim. The last ping was from a remote, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The results came in with a speed that would have astounded any adult. The name Alexander Vance. The identity was a match. The public image was a stark, almost comical contrast to the man in the photograph. This Alexander Vance wasn't a young man on a beach. He was a titan of industry, a reclusive and fiercely private CEO of Vance Innovations, a global tech conglomerate. The man was a ghost, but a powerful one, a name whispered in boardrooms and revered in the halls of finance. The search was over, the puzzle was solved. Alexander now had a name, a location, and a motive. But more importantly, he had a new purpose. He wasn't just fighting for his company anymore, he was fighting for his family. He looked at Liam, his son, a small boy who had faced down an empire to save his mom. He saw the courage, the unwavering loyalty, and the pure, unadulterated love that had driven him to this point. He was no longer a cold, detached CEO. He was a father, and he was going to bring his family home. The abandoned warehouse, a decaying monument to a forgotten industrial past, was a silent and foreboding presence on the city's outskirts. It was a ghost in the landscape, a place where business had died. But now, it was a place where a new kind of business was about to be conducted. Alexander, a man who had orchestrated countless corporate takeovers, was now orchestrating a rescue mission. His team was a small, elite unit of his most trusted private security personnel. And his son, Liam, was his eyes and ears. The news articles painted a picture of a ruthless, brilliant, and untouchable billionaire. He was a man who had built an empire from the ground up, a man whose life was a series of mergers, acquisitions, and strategic triumphs. He was not a man of warmth or emotion. He was a man of power. The contrast between his mother's humble, loving life and the CEO's opulent, cold world was a slap in the face. How could these two lives have ever intersected? How could a man like that be his father? Liam, sitting in the back of Alexander's armored SUV, was glued to his tablet, a tiny beacon of genius in a world of men with guns. He was navigating the warehouse's digital blueprints, a complex schematic of dead ends and hidden passages he had found in Jonathan's files. There's a main entrance and 2 service entrances, he said, his voice a quiet, unwavering command. The main entrance is a trap. I'm seeing a series of motion sensors and tripwires. They're expecting us there. But the proof was there, irrefutable and cold. The man in the photograph was the man in the headlines. Liam was not a dreamer, he was a realist, and the reality was that his mother's future, his own future, rested in the hands of a man who didn't even know they existed. Alexander, his face a mask of grim determination, nodded. He was a man of action, a man who had built his empire on quick, decisive moves. We'll use the service entrance on the east side, he said, his voice low and commanding. It's the one they're least likely to expect. Mark, you and your team will secure the perimeter. I'll go in with Liam. The fear, once a chilling presence, was now a driving force. The clock was ticking. The threat, in pieces, echoed in his mind. He knew he couldn't go to the police. He knew he couldn't trust anyone. He had to go to Alexander Vance directly. But how does a 6-year-old boy, with no money, no connections, and no social standing, get a private audience with one of the most powerful men in the world? He looked at the digital picture of his father, the face of a man who was both a stranger and a savior. He was a fortress, a castle surrounded by a digital moat of firewalls and a human moat of security. To reach him, Liam would have to become a digital knight, a child with the tools of a master hacker, and he would have to crack the fortress from the inside out. His genius was not a toy anymore, it was a weapon, and he was ready to use it. The vast digital labyrinth of Vance Innovations was a world away from the small, cluttered apartment that was Liam's home. The company, a monument to human ingenuity and corporate power, was a fortress of glass, steel, and code. Its headquarters, a towering skyscraper that pierced the city's clouds, was impenetrable. Its digital infrastructure, a complex web of firewalls and encryption, was considered the gold standard in corporate security. To a 6-year-old boy armed with a tablet and a burning need, it was a challenge. And Liam, a child who had never met a puzzle he couldn't solve, was ready to play. His first step was to understand his enemy. He began by scouring the public-facing internet for every detail he could find on Alexander Vance. He learned that the man was a ghost in the machine, a CEO who rarely gave interviews and never appeared at public events. His life was a series of meticulously planned transactions and strategic victories. The man was a fortress, not just in his company's security, but in his own personal life. Liam realized that a direct head-on approach was impossible. He couldn't simply walk up to the skyscraper and demand an audience. He would be stopped by security long before he could get a foot in the door. "She's my family," Alexander replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. "And my son is the only one who can navigate this labyrinth. We're a team." He needed to create an event, a digital seismic tremor that would be too significant to ignore, but subtle enough not to be mistaken for a full-blown attack. His genius, once a tool for simple, harmless projects, was now a weapon. He began to build a program, a tiny, harmless piece of code he named Ember. Ember was a viral AI, a self-propagating worm that once inside the Vance Innovations network would spread silently, undetected, like a whisper in a crowded room. As they entered the silent, cavernous interior of the warehouse, the air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. The silence was a living, breathing thing, a palpable tension that coiled around them with every step. Marcus, his senses on high alert, his hand on his sidearm, moved with the quiet grace of a predator. Liam, clutching his tablet, was his guide, a small, courageous shadow in the darkness. "Third floor," Liam whispered, his eyes on the screen. "There's a hidden room in the old boiler section. That's where she is." The purpose of Ember was not to destroy or steal. Its purpose was to annoy. It would subtly alter the company's internal network, causing minor, non-malicious chaos. It would redirect emails to the wrong departments, cause minor glitches in the company's server, and occasionally change the font on a PowerPoint presentation. These were not the signs of a hostile attack. They were the signs of a catastrophic security vulnerability, a flaw in the fortress that was too deep to be patched. They moved through the warehouse, a silent, deadly ballet of shadows and light. They avoided the motion sensors Liam had detected, sidestepped the tripwires, and navigated the maze of rusty pipes and broken machinery with a precision that was born of a shared purpose. They were a father and son, a CEO and a genius, a team that had been forged in the fire of adversity. For 3 days, Liam worked with a tireless intensity that defied his age. His small fingers, flying across the keyboard, were a blur of motion. He wrote lines of code, built algorithms, and crafted the perfect digital Trojan horse. His mission was not to cause damage, but to create a mystery, a digital ghost that was both everywhere and nowhere, a threat that couldn't be quantified or contained. They found the hidden room. The door was a heavy steel slab, secured with a complex biometric lock. "Jonathan's security," Alexander muttered, a note of grim amusement in his voice. He always did like a challenge. On the 4th day, he launched Ember. He used a series of proxies and a carefully constructed false trail to inject the program into the Vance Innovations Network through a seemingly innocuous link in a corporate newsletter. Once inside, Ember went to work. The chaos was immediate, but subtle. A quarterly report was accidentally sent to the marketing department. A CEO's email was forwarded to a junior intern. A company-wide presentation, in the middle of a crucial board meeting, suddenly appeared in Comic Sans font. The company's IT department was in an uproar, scrambling to find the source, to patch the vulnerability. But there was nothing to patch. Ember was a shapeshifter, a digital phantom that left no trace and had no source. The fortress was crumbling from the inside out, not with a bang, but with 1,000 tiny, maddening inconveniences. Liam, however, was already a step ahead. He had a file of Jonathan's digital fingerprints and biometric data, a piece of information he had extracted from the traitor's hard drive. He held his tablet up to the lock, and in a flash of green light, the door opened. Alexander Vance, a man accustomed to total control, was furious. His company, his masterpiece of efficiency and security, was a joke. He had summoned his entire IT and security team, a group of the most brilliant minds in the industry, and they had come up empty. They had no idea what was happening. They had no idea who was doing it. The digital attacker was a ghost, a legend in the making. They found her inside. Elena was lying on a dirty cot, her hands and feet bound, her face pale with fear, but her eyes, when she saw them, were a mixture of shock and profound relief. "Liam," she whispered, her voice a cracked, dry sob. "You came for me." But Liam wasn't done. The chaos was just the bait. Now came the trap. He crafted a final, meticulously coded message. It was a single, non-traceable file that appeared on Alexander Vance's private tablet, a device that was supposed to be completely offline and secure. The message was simple and direct. "I can make it all stop," it read, "but you have to meet with me. The security vulnerability is real, and I'm the only one who can fix it. If you agree, I will tell you where and when to meet. I'll be in the park across the street from your office at noon tomorrow. Come alone, and don't bring your security." "I told you I would," Liam said, his voice filled with a desperate, heartbreaking conviction. He ran to her side, his small hands working furiously to untie her. Alexander Vance, a man who had faced every kind of corporate challenge, was now facing one that defied all logic. He was being blackmailed, not for money or secrets, but for a meeting. And the blackmailer was a ghost who had effortlessly breached his company's impenetrable security. He was intrigued, but also a raging fire of fury. This was an insult, a direct challenge to his authority, his power, his very existence. He ran a full scan on the message, a complete forensic analysis, but it was untraceable. The message had simply appeared. Alexander, meanwhile, had his attention on the figure standing in the corner of the room. It was Jonathan, his face a mask of furious, defeated rage. "You ruined everything," Jonathan hissed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You were supposed to be my triumph. You were supposed to be my path to power." He was a man who trusted no one, but he was a man of logic. And the logical conclusion was that this person, whoever they were, had a level of skill that was unprecedented. He knew he had to meet them. He had to face this rival, this digital ghost who had made a mockery of his empire. He would expose them, he would crush them, and he would restore his company's security. He sent a single, coded reply through the same channel the hacker had used. "I agree. Noon. The park? Alone." Alexander, for the first time, felt no anger. He felt only a profound pity for the man who had traded his honor for a throne he would never sit on. "You betrayed me, Jonathan," he said, his voice quiet and deadly. "You betrayed our friendship, our company, and most importantly, you betrayed an innocent woman and child. That is a crime I will never forgive." The stage was set, a tense, high-stakes showdown between two minds. Alexander Vance, the ruthless CEO, ready to face a rival he believed to be a corporate spy or a seasoned hacker, and Liam, a small boy in a world far too big for him, ready to confront the father he had never met, the man who was his only hope. The meeting point was the city's botanical garden, a serene oasis of manicured lawns and towering ancient trees, a stark contrast to the sterile, high-tech world of Vance Innovations. For Alexander Vance, it was a test of his mettle, a challenge to his authority. He arrived precisely at noon, dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than Liam's apartment. He was a man of cold, calculated logic, and he expected to meet a rival, a corporate spy, or a seasoned hacker, someone who had the nerve and the skill to outwit him. He scanned the crowd, looking for a figure hunched over a laptop, a face hidden under a cap, or any sign of a digital provocateur. He saw nothing but the usual lunchtime crowd, young couples, old men feeding pigeons, and a few tourists snapping pictures. The confrontation was short and decisive. Jonathan, a man of words and codes, was no match for a man of action. Alexander's security team, led by Mark, stormed the room and apprehended Jonathan, his dreams of power turning to dust in a single, shattering moment. Mark, a seasoned professional with a decade of experience, looked at Alexander with concern. "Sir, it's too dangerous. Let me go in. I'll find her." As they walked out of the warehouse, Elena leaning on Alexander's arm, Liam holding her hand, the sun was rising, a new day, a new beginning. The chaos of the past few weeks had ended, and in its place, a new reality was born. A family forged in the fires of a kidnapping, united by a love that was stronger than any contract or betrayal. The sun was a warm, gentle presence on their faces as they walked out of the warehouse. The terrifying silence of the past weeks was replaced by the simple sounds of life, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds, and the soft, steady rhythm of their footsteps. Elena, now safely in the arms of a man she barely knew but owed everything to, looked at Alexander, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude, awe, and a cautious hope. He was no longer the boy she had met on a beach 7 years ago. He was a man of immense power, a man who had moved heaven and earth to save her. He was about to turn and walk away when the boy looked directly at him, a silent, knowing look that sent a shiver down Alexander's spine. The boy's eyes, he realized with a jolt, were exactly like his own, the same shade of deep, piercing brown, the same unwavering intensity. For Alexander, the world was no longer a cold, calculated chessboard of corporate takeovers and strategic moves. It was a world with a heart, a world with a family. He looked at Liam, his son, a small, courageous figure who had faced down an empire to save his mom. The boy, a genius in a world of mortals, had shown him a truth he had long forgotten. The most valuable things in life are not measured in money, but in love. He was no longer just a CEO. He was a father, a protector, and a man who was now inextricably linked to a woman from his past, a woman who had given him the greatest gift he could have ever asked for. Liam, his heart a frantic drumbeat against his ribs, watched the man approach. This was him, his father, a man of immense power and cold, remote beauty. The man's face, a mirror image of the one in the faded photograph, was a mask of suspicion and irritation. He was a king in his castle, and Liam was a peasant trespassing on his lands. But Liam wasn't a peasant. He was a son. They returned to Alexander's luxurious mansion, a place that had once felt like an empty, sterile monument to his success. Now, with the presence of Elena and Liam, it felt like a home. Elena, a woman who had spent her life in a small, cozy apartment, was now navigating a world of opulence and grandeur, but her eyes were not on the marble floors or the crystal chandeliers. Her eyes were on Alexander, a man whose cold, professional exterior had been melted away by the warmth of a son he never knew he had. Alexander stopped a few feet from the bench, his arms crossed over his chest. his expression one of utter disdain. "Where is he?" he demanded, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Where is the person who sent me that message?" The chaos of the past few weeks gave way to a new reality. A quiet, profound change in all of their lives. Alexander, for the first time in years, was not focused on work. He was focused on his family. He spent his days getting to know his son, a brilliant, fascinating child who saw the world in a way he had never imagined. He and Elena began to reconnect, their relationship. Once a ghost from the past, now a real and tangible presence. They talked for hours, catching up on 7 years of lost time, their conversations filled with a new kind of intimacy. An intimacy born not of passion, but of respect, trust, and shared trauma. Liam didn't flinch. He looked up at the towering man, his voice a quiet, unwavering command that defied his size. "I am the person who sent you the message," he said. "The contract with Jonathan, the traitor, was terminated. The corporate coup was averted. The company was now more secure, more powerful than ever. But for Alexander, the greatest triumph was not in his business. It was in his home. He had found a family that had been born out of a terrible betrayal, a kidnapping, and a 6-year-old boy's unwavering love." Alexander let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This is a joke, a very expensive, very childish joke. I suggest you go home before I call the police." One evening, as they were sitting by the fireplace, a silent, comfortable presence filling the room, Elena looked at him, her eyes filled with a profound sense of peace. "You're a good man, Alexander," she said, her voice a soft, gentle whisper. "I'm sorry you had to go through all this. You can call the police," Liam said calmly, "but they won't know where my mom is. And the clock is ticking." "I'm not," Alexander replied, his voice filled with a quiet conviction. He took her hand in his, a gesture of quiet intimacy that felt more real than any public display of affection. "If I hadn't, I never would have found you again. I never would have found him." The words, so eerily similar to the threat he had received, struck Alexander like a physical blow. His facade of cool arrogance began to crack. He looked at the boy, truly looked at him, and saw a composure that was terrifyingly familiar. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, a note of unease creeping into his voice. "Who is your mother?" The story of the CEO and the genius baby became a legend, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most extraordinary things are born from the most ordinary mistakes. A wrong turn, a fateful meeting, and a kidnapping that brought two worlds together and created a new, unconventional, and perfectly beautiful family. Alexander had found a love he never knew he was looking for. Elena had found a protector she never thought she would have. And Liam, the genius baby, had found the family he had always deserved. Liam held up his tablet, his small finger navigating the screen. "Her name is Elena," he said, his voice trembling for the first time. "She was kidnapped 3 days ago, and you are her only hope." He played the encrypted distress message, the grainy, shaky video of his mother, her face a mask of fear, her voice a desperate whisper. He played the chilling threat from the kidnapper. "Tell Alexander Vance that the clock is ticking. Tell him if he doesn't want to find you and your mother in pieces, he'll give us what we want." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay with us for the next one. And while you're here, check out our other videos. There's always more to explore. The raw, unfiltered emotion in the video, the genuine fear in Elena's eyes, was impossible to fake. Alexander's world, a world of logic and reason, was suddenly spinning out of control. Elena. The name was a distant memory, a ghost from his past. A beautiful, free-spirited artist he had met on a business trip 7 years ago. A brief, passionate encounter that had faded into the background of his life. A moment of weakness he had long since forgotten. And now, a 6-year-old boy was standing in front of him, claiming to be his son. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. "This is insane," Alexander muttered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "This is a scam. You and your mother are trying to blackmail me."